I think you mentioned in the earlier stages of of the discussion, you talked about the factors, right, that could lead to warfare,
Yeah.
right? And one of them, like when you look at history, for the most part, or maybe not the most part, but for a significant part of history, the reason why people went to warfare was because of resource limitation.
Yeah.
Right? So maybe there was a particular land that was arable, maybe a very fertile land, and they wanted to have that land for themselves to farm, to produce for their families and all of that.
Yeah.
Or maybe there were some mineral resources, right? Like we are, as Africans, right, we can relate to that in the sense that we were colonized,
Yeah.
right? So the reason why they colonized us was not because that they wanted to pretty much force their ideology. It was just they wanted the resources.
Yeah.
The ideological stuff came
Secondary
as
to
like probably even secondary, but it was more like like a background, but it was even more like a decoy, right? Saying we want to civilize these guys, but the major reason was even more about like getting the
like
resource.
selling point.
Yeah, selling point. Let's preach Christianity. let's civilize them, right? But the major reason why they came was because of resources, right? So I think when we look at it, the resources plays a major role in causing warfare. Resource limitations. Then there's also the second hand of like ideological differences, right? Ideological differences also. That's saw that in like the Cold War, where we had like Russia or let's say the Soviet Union and
basically democracy community.
allies forces were competing regarding what ideology should reign over the larger part of the world, right? So I want to take it one by one, in the sense that okay, this resource limitation, is there the way that the world can approach it in the sense that you can minimize the effect of people, or the propensity rather of people to go to war because of their clashing over land, clashing over resources, clashing over these things? Like how exactly, is there a better way to approach it rather than just letting this continuous cycle of warfare to keep on going?
No. If your answer is a like strict yes or no answer, the answer is no. But another thing, one of the reasons why we are probably in the most peaceful time in human history is also because we are in the most prosperous time in human history.
Yeah.
Most countries are productive. Most people, for the most part, about say 70% of the world now lives on more than $1 a day. Throughout human history, what we've known is poverty for the most part. It's only now where people are having abundance. In parts of the Western world, there's nothing like food shortages again. That didn't used to be
common.
the norm. Before it was okay, our resources are depleted, we might need resources. Who are the people we can get them from? And then you go head on. And then there might also be ideological differences too, as you said, though maybe we might get to that later. But now now that probably there might be a superpower that leads who the ideology or what the ideology is, though people might not always like it, but when more and more people think
different
with a certain ideology, there is less tendency for them to clash than when everybody has different ideology towards things, and then obviously it might lead to war.
Yeah, so I would like to touch more on that ideological point, but maybe not now, right? In the sense that I think the Western Hemisphere basically has tried to like put up this identity of democracy as like the go-to standard, right, for countries all over the world. So even if a country is not fully democratic, you see them always trying to act democratic, like you see in Russia, for example. Like you see in Russia, in China, TV. I think
in Africa here.
Yeah, even in Africa, we have demo elections. I think the last discussion we talked about the TV elections going on in Communist Party,
Fake
right?
Freedom of the press and all of that. We have to put up.
So I think the ideological differences are in a way being resolved, although there's still so much work to be done. But we talked about the resource constraints, right? I think even in Nigeria, right, we are seeing that kind of situation play out, in the sense that, like Ifeanyi was pointing out correctly, he said that before, right, it was very rare that you have long stretches of time where there's no famine, where people are having access to food constantly, as we have currently in most parts of the world right now, right? But then there's this thing called climate change, right, that is starting to happen. Some people argue whether or not climate change is true or not, but one thing you can't deny is that for many parts of the world, right? Even in Nigeria, northern Nigeria, for example, we are seeing severe cases of drought starting to happen,
Yeah.
right? So there are places like farmlands where previously farmlands where they usually rear their cattle and all of that. They don't really have access to, arable land there anymore. So you are seeing the herders starting to move down south, and they are starting to clash with like the farmers. This farmer herders class crisis that we are seeing, right? Which is also causing another form of warfare again, right? It's almost like we're talking about what we're saying. So yeah, but what I'm saying is basically that it's looking like climate change is starting to slowly, but almost assuredly bring us to that point where people are starting to have this clash again for resources, right? So how exactly can we like mitigate, or is there a way that we can share these resources? Maybe Senator will want to speak on that. Like, is there a way, do you feel like there's a possibility for humanity to like address this resource limitation in the sense of maybe the UN creates a model for sharing of mineral resources or land resources and all of that? Do you think that's feasible?
The UN has been trying to do that for decades now. So I think we can ask them towards success. I think they've been successful to a great extent. I mean, let's give it to them because it's true. We have a lot of opportunities presenting now to people than ever before. Like we've rightly mentioned, I mean, it's very easy for you to stand from the corner of your village and then become something like just because of that. It's much more difficult before. But the question that I would like to put forward is the people, like where are we going to get this resource from? Probably going to get it from the countries that have abundance in quote. So what would be the caveat for it? Because eventually that's where it goes to. So look at the US, for instance. They try to go to a place and help them, yeah. But you know that they are surely going to get something back, and that is true for any country, whether it's China. I mean the superpower now.
Yeah.
They're coming to help you. You are going to give them something, and that's something you are giving them back. It always cause conflict. Always, you see that there's a section of the population that don't want that
agree
for
with
it.
it.
I mean, we've had something similar. I think there was a bill that was passed recently on LGBT, and people are kind of like coming for it just because you want to get some deal for. Of course, those things will happen. So those are also like precursors to conflict in the future, because by the time a bigger country is helping you, then kind of you just become like an extension of that country, and they want to have a say in your policies, because then it has to favor them obviously, and so that is already building towards something again in the future. So we can have a conversation around that, and I know it's kind of different. So the idea of sharing resource, I feel, is also a very delicate matter. I think the UN is already trying to do that by saying, okay, if you have more, I mean, we also have a lot of foundations all over the world. Say the Bill Gates Foundation now. I mean, take the Bill Gates Foundation away from, say, West Africa, for instance, and then see what malaria is going to do to that particular region. All right. And so I think that is happening, but I'm not exactly confident if we're going to get to a place in human history that there's going to be equitable access to resource. I don't think that will ever happen. I think the imbalance is probably what is even driving the world forward. I mean, if the world is balanced and is truly balanced, I don't think we're ever going to get to that personally. I think we're always going to have superpowers and lesser powers. We're going to have people in between. We're going to have countries that are just there and they're just okay, but they're always going to be those ones up and those one down, and that will always happen, to be very honest. That's my position on it. Whether that will lead to war or not is a different conversation.
Yeah, I was actually going to like double down on that in the sense that, so if you know that we will constantly always be in the situation where there's resource limitation, right? Like for Nigeria, like the headers farmer clash right now. So that means like inevitably we are resigning to the fact that conflict will always arise, right? And warfare as a result may come out.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. Again, some things might help if there is more adaptation, because sometimes these things to hinge on leadership.
Yep.
If there is more adaptation and people are able to make those arable lands, because those lands, the north, for example, in Nigeria, is very big, is very vast. There is more than enough food from that region to feed probably the whole of West Africa if it's properly cultivated. But when there is a lack of leadership, a lack of direction. Those are when those kind of things occur. Also, countries can basically go to war for anything sometimes. So again, as we're coming back on the topic, going back on topic, depends on the motive. In the Arab world, a lot of the land they fight for basically is deserts, but they still go to war. So it might not always mean because of resources.
Yeah.
Sometimes some countries might come in because of the oil and all of that, but for the most part, even in the internal conflicts in the Arab world, it's a lot of desert, but they still go to war. So countries go to war for different reasons. So we can't just pin it on, okay, because you want some
Resources, right?
some resources.
Yeah.
And I would like to add to that because I feel in this age and time, resources is not the primary reason why countries go to war.
Yes.
I think it's all about maybe they want to extend their ideology in terms of economical ideology like capitalism and communism, for instance. That still basically exists. I mean, that's the present what US is fighting with China. Basically, all right. There's also like religious ideologies that also kind of seep in sometimes, and sometimes all these economic ideologies stem out from those religious beliefs too sometimes. And so I think these days and time, people are not really bothered. At least when I say people, I mean the leadership, because those are the people going to war, really.
Yeah.
You know, they're not really bothered about the resource because more often than not, they have those resources. It's more or less, okay, these people should think the way I'm thinking, or they should not interfere in what I'm doing, something like that. And so the war we have these days, we can give all mostly the wars that are happening now.
Yeah.
There may be a lot of maybe land and they happen, but I feel it's a subset of the larger thing of it's more of like an identity thing, an ideology thing, a power tussle kind of a thing, which we have more.